a little bit about NLP. So what do you guys think when you talk about NLP for and hypnosis for psychic development, intuition? Uh, what I'm always thinking of is back, God, it was in the 90s. I took a class on remote viewing when that was big. And, came out of the military. And when you really get the research, of course, what happens is the idea of it gets out, as we were talking earlier about the internet marketer guys kind of get in touch with it. And suddenly it's bizarre, like there was one guy, and he was from the military, but he would, when he would do a training, this is back in the 90s, right? Early after the turn of the century. He would say, he'd come to the room with a trainer, he'd have two big guys with the mirrored sunglasses, the suits, and they'd be like, they had something in their ear and they'd be standing there, because people don't want me to, teach this, and government's trying to shut it down. And, these two guys, he was something in the Army, some kind of officer, and he was associated with the program, but he ended up being a good marketer. Anyway, going back, say like these two guys, one's an ex-Navy SEAL and one's an Army Ranger or something. And, they're here to do that. And I'm thinking, and somebody finally said, I got a question. Yeah. If that was truly a Navy SEAL and that was truly an Army Ranger, if they knew that the true government wanted you killed, they would not be protecting you. Because but it was good theater. It was good marketing theater, right? But anyway, when we got into remote viewing, what was kind of cool, and it comes out of the Stargate project, which morphed into the Jedi project for the military. And this was in the late 70s, going into the early 80s, where we heard the Russians were doing it. Of course, the Russians are doing it. We're going to do it. And so they were trying to figure out, how can we do this? And so they started the Stargate program, and then started the Jedi project, which is run by Colonel John Alexander, United States Army, Special Forces. And he really got into this stuff. And so they started looking at like ways you could make, and it's all about making better warriors. That's really all it's about. Let's make a better warrior. And so, they were studying this and studying that. And there's two stories to tell here. One is, and they don't talk about it anymore, but it was a cool story where Tony Robbins used to talk about it a lot, where they took the best pistol shooters in the United States Army. It was a colonel and two sergeants, and that's all they did was shoot pistols. That was their job, competition team. And so they went to study them because NLP, they approached some NLP trainers and they said, well, we can, if you tell us the skill you want and we find people that know how to do it, we'll give you a better protocol to teach it. So anyway, they decided to use pistol shooting because, they've been doing that forever in the Army, and the Army training was 7 days. They'd shoot around 750 rounds of ammunition. Only about half qualified on the first round, and 15 or 20% would shoot expert. So they had their metrics. So they went to study these guys, right? And again, time is money, so that's what they're looking at. And so they got those three guys, the colonel and two sergeants, then a couple other the competition teams. And they were looking for anything that they could duplicate. And one of the first things they found was there was no similarities between some of the rituals the guy would do, how they'd hold the weapon, what they do. The only physical one that they found was they could control their breathing. And they speculated, now it would be easy to do, but back then it would have been a little bit harder, that would control your blood pressure and your heart rate, so your hand won't shake when you're holding the weapon. Great. So it's easy to teach people breathing techniques, right? So there was no physical thing that they could really do. They could work on the stance, but it was all slightly different. There was no thing that seemed to make the difference. But then they started looking at beliefs and attitudes. And what they found were those top three people and a couple of the other really good shooters all had the same belief sets. One is they never fired the weapon. They released the bullet to go down range. They also all had the thought that the bullet really wants to hit the target. If I do my job right, the bullet will hit the target, right? and that it's natural and normal to shoot a handgun, that it's easy to do. In fact, you couldn't understand why other people can't do it, you know. And it's a skill. Once you learn it, it stays. Even if you don't get to practice a lot, you should be able to pick it back up and do it quite well. Kind of like, as one guy said, kind of like riding a bike, you know. I'm like, okay. So then when they decided to do the training, they brought in, I think it was 12 or 15 people. And the only thing that they asked was that the people there had no real experience shooting a handgun, right? They're in the Army, obviously, with an Army training, but you know, they hadn't been around it, right? So they had no beliefs really. They were tabula rasa. They really had no beliefs either way. And so they brought them in and they started the training. Well, and the one thing they did is they suggested not spending the whole first day teaching all the intricacies of the handgun you'd be using, a 45 caliber at the time, right? You could add that on later, and actually had nothing to do with shooting the weapon, right? It was a different skill set. So that cut one day off, right? So I found that out later. But still, you're talking 4 days. It would take 4 days, right? And so they brought the soldiers in. It was mostly men, but there were a couple women. Mostly enlisted, couple of officers. But they started the training with the concept of them telling the group, ladies and gentlemen, this course is impossible to fail. In fact, most of you will do well. Everyone in this room should qualify easily. And in fact, most of you are going to shoot experts. And once you learn this skill, it'll stay with you, whether you get to shoot a lot or not. It'll be a natural, normal skill. And they kept hammering that in, right? Now, if you've ever been around a military training, that is not usually how they approach the people that they're training, right? They're yelling at them, telling you how hard it is, how many people are going to wash out, yada, yada, yada. So this was different. They kept stressing that the course impossible to fail. It's an easy skill. You're going to do good, da, 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 da. And then they did teach them the breathing technique, right? And about allowing the bullet to go down range, see it hit the bullet. And that's the other thing. All the guys that were good shooters imagined right before they'd start the thing that the bullet's hitting the target, right? Great. And so then after doing that, anyway, the training was cut down to a day and a half. They shot around 250 rounds of ammunition. They all qualified, and over half qualified as expert. And then on a follow-up, I think it was 90 days, according to Colonel Alexander, that everyone maintained the skill set, even those that really didn't get to practice shooting a handgun, right? So it was interesting. The Army really didn't do anything with that training because they figured it would be too hard to retrain all the training NCOs, right? The trainers, the sergeants that do the training. But they put it away. They put the idea away. And so Colonel Alexander said, well, this is interesting. It's a lot about the mindset, right? So then they were going to duplicate psychic development. And the skill they decided to do, excuse my nose itches, was remote viewing, right? Where you could see a target, right? But actually you don't go see the target, you channel the target, right? You're not going there and seeing, you're not teleporting or going out of your body. It's not that, it's that you kind of become a download and the information comes to you. Great. So they started the protocol. They found some people that could do it and some psychics, and they studied some psychics. And again, they thought the mindset was the idea of it's natural, it's normal, it's easy. The skill is there, right? And so, you know, it took a little while, but they hemmed it down. And so then what they decided, they found that the best people they could train were ones that didn't think they were psychic going into the training. In fact, if you showed up trying to apply for the training and you told people you were already psychic, you were excluded from the training, right? In fact, they'd rather have a skeptic, right? And so it ended up most of the people they trained were somehow associated with special operations, which is a different mindset, right? And then they went through the protocol, which is, again, you kind of you open yourself up, you just download information into your neurology, into your body itself. And then most of the process is taking it from the information that was downloaded that there's no words for and putting it on paper. Great, right? And what they found was the people that did the best, again, adapted the skills, that it was natural, it was normal, it was easy. And also they found that the thing that they had to really work on was keeping the participants from using their imagination. Just get the information and just put it out there. Don't let your imagination jump in. In other words, if you're visiting, you're trying to find a site, and again, this is military, and you see big and dark and hard, so, oh, it's a building, if you use your imagination. Well, what if it was a ship? Like there's no battleships anymore, but a big Navy ship, a cruiser, an aircraft carrier. They're big. They look like it's like huge. It's 10 stories high. But, it's not a building. It's a ship. If you've ever seen one up close, they're huge, right? And so they found that people that and that they could keep their ego out of it. And one of the ways they kept their ego out of it, they put people in small teams, maybe 6 people. And the person would come in, give them a target, and there's a protocol to give them the target. And then everyone would do their own work. They didn't collaborate because they found collaboration screwed everything up. The dominant personality would take over, or the others would even in the special ops thing where there's a lot of alphas, it just never worked. So everybody do their own work. And say there's 6 people on a team, everybody submit their findings. The next day, they would come in and say, congratulations, bravo team, you got the target. Now we don't know which one of us, if there were 6 of us, we don't know which one of us got the target. But the fact is we got the target, right? Great. But what they were waiting to hear is if any one of those people wanted to know which one of us got the target, they would be excluded from the further training. Because they said, then your ego's getting involved, And again, they did quite well with that because they were special operations people, which really just focused on mission. We just got to get the mission done. Doesn't matter which one of us completes the mission, as long as the mission gets completed. We all just do our part. There are no freaking Rambos out there, right? So, everybody does their job, we can complete the mission. So that's kind of that story, right? But what they found, the people that got into it, was even when they shut and they were getting quite good responses with it. When they shut the mission, when they shut that part of the program down, or did they, as they would say, but when they shut it down, all the people found that the side effect from doing the training, because again, these were people that didn't really believe that they had psychic abilities. They just didn't. They all talked about how their intuition went through the roof, right? Because as you connect to your higher self, that's part of the process, and let that information download, they use the analogy of it's like opening up, now we would say high-speed internet. There was no high-speed internet then, but it would be like, so the channel's open. And unfortunately, they didn't know how to shut it off, right? So they get intuitions all the time, and it drove some of them kind of, because it was a side effect of the training. It just made everybody much more intuitive. And then the other side of it that's pretty cool, when people ask, well, why'd they shut it down if it was successful? Well, again, this was the late 70s, early 80s. We just started putting satellites in space that could literally take a picture of a pack of cigarettes from 400 miles in space, right? And I think it was by 84 or 5, we had enough satellites in orbit that there wasn't one place on the planet that we couldn't take pictures of within a few hours, right? So why would you have a bunch of guys in a room looking for something when in fact, the last thing they kept them doing was wasn't to exactly find a target, was to narrow it down. And then the other side effect they found, the bad part about doing remote viewing to find people, is people are fluid, they change, they move. It was very good to find static targets, right? But things are always moving, And so from a military application, if you're trying to find a ship, well, the ship's going 20 knots underwater. If you're trying to find Red October, if it's moving 20 knots, I find it right now. By the time I report it, it's been 4 hours. It's 100 miles away, give or take, right? So it's kind of interesting, and they can shift and they can change. Same with people trying to find a person, they can constantly change locations, right? So just something to think about. And then one of the remote viewers swears that they kept posting that they knew right where Osama was, going back to Osama bin Laden, and that's where they ended up finding him. Now we find out he hadn't moved very much in several years. There was a threat, he'd moved to the caves then, but he always came back to the same location. Anyway, it's just kind of interesting. So when I tie that into NLP and hypnosis for psychic development, maybe it's not about the skills as much as it is the attitude, the beliefs, and developing a protocol that you can use, right? And then going it from that viewpoint, and then what do you want to do with it? And again, they also found that the guys and ladies, there were a lot of ladies, several ladies in the program, that if they had a vested interest in the target, it didn't work as well. It was better for just like, I need to find this, right? And yeah, if that makes any sense. So anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about. We're not going to actually do anything right now. Maybe I'll put a thing together later on if people are interested. But we can share ideas, because we got 30 minutes. Share ideas and feedback on that kind of stuff. Who'd like to start?
I will. I didn't know about intuition before. Um, oh, you can see all that behind there.
I think you
I
need
did.
more shoes. My
Yes.
my my psychic ability
Mm,
says you're going to buy
yeah.
shoes this month before
I
the end
don't
of the
know
month.
why. I don't know why my little screen didn't come up, but I believe in intuition. I didn't before. Not that I didn't. I just didn't know about it. I didn't trust myself, and that's from all those years of abuse, decades of abuse, and I didn't trust myself. I didn't know to listen to my intuition. Actually, I think I was listening to the ego, which I didn't know about either. It was just the louder voice of the two. And so now when I um, teach my clients about intuition, I use the story of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and Gene Wilder is in the movie, and all the children run into the chocolate factory, and they're at the chocolate river, and Augustus Gloop is drinking all the chocolate out of the river, and they're not listening to the sane voice, the voice that's going to get them the whole entire package, the whole factory. And that voice is, don't stop. Stop it. Don't do it. And then Augustus Gloop is in overdrive, and he's gobbling up and then gets sucked up into the machine. And like Violet Beauregard, she, you know, snatches away something that she shouldn't have, and she turns into a purple thing. And this whole time the Gene Wilder character is going, no, don't stop, put it back, we haven't fully tested it, in a calm rational voice, but her mind is like, yeah, there's candy. And the other one who has a wants a golden goose, and she's jumps up to grab that goose and then falls into the garbage pit where fire could be started, and he's going, no, don't stop. And here she's a bad egg. But I use that because as an example to teach my clients, because it's that voice, that it's not showy, it's not loud. If you're on a diet, and you know there's chips in the house and you're like, oh, I want those chips. And then the other voice goes, no, don't stop. That's the voice you listen to. You listen to the voice that's going to get you to your goal. And your intuition always wants you to get you to your goal. And I, didn't know of these many parts in our mind, I didn't know. And now I teach people about the parts, and the ego and the
Right.
chatters in your
Cool.
head. So I love listening to my intuition. If it tells me to stop and do something, oh, I do it, when I recognize it.
Well,
Takes
that's the big.
practice. It takes practice.
Well, yeah, because education, you were an educator. It beats it out of you.
Exactly.
What's your empirical evidence? Let's test
Yeah.
the hypothesis.
Very
You know,
true.
I mean, not that that's bad. It's just that,
That's what we knew. And that was taught to us as educators so we could sort of control 24 6-year-olds so it's not chaotic in the classroom, and but it's we also had time. Our principal was pretty much like that, beat that out of them. But then the teachers of joy, like me, we were like, okay, children, we'll do this, but keep it down. Shh, don't share your gifts, quiet. But so we don't get in trouble by the mean principal. But it is true. That's what we had to do, and because we didn't know what we didn't know, like you always say.
yeah. All right. Yeah,
Well,
listening to intuition.
I think a
and
lot of what we do is based on a sense or intuition sometimes. Like working with a client, they may be saying one thing, but our sense or, our gut feel, we've got all the neurons firing off in our gut going like, something's not adding up. Or so I think, personally,
Well,
it can help us. But I think when we're talking with people, it's also taking in other senses, right?
yeah. Well, and then when you add intuition with experience,
Yeah, it's powerful.
I had a consultation. The guy runs a big hypnosis clinic, sent me a guy because it was addictions. And 2 minutes into the call, I go, excuse my language, this is a fucking waste of time.
you said it to the client?
No, to myself, because I'm
Oh,
like, I could be wrong. So I kept going. But when I
okay.
laid down, okay, I need you to do this, this, and this. Oh, okay, I'll get back to you.
Uh-oh.
you know, so it was like, but I said, but yeah, we'll do an exercise before we're done today. But yeah,
I think too, the way society looks at this natural gift, so many cultures look at it as black magic or being, of an evil nature. If you have this gift, many of us grow up, not necessarily in my background, but if you grow up with the gift and you have these experiences and you're of a culture where they look down upon it or fear it, then you learn to repress it. And in my own case, as a child, I had so many experiences where I was, having these extrasensory, for lack of a better term, experiences and not knowing what to do with them. And I come from a family of scientists, so there was no way that it was deemed as real or could be, that could be any truth to it. So you learn to repress it. And when you're working with a client, I think often, repression is such a big part of what they've been dealing with, getting them to accept what's natural, what's normal, what we all have the capability to do if you want to translate across, is probably the biggest obstacle, getting them to be at ease with the fact that they have this capability to overcome, to change mindsets, to grow, because they've been told no all their lives. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Well, we'll ask Mr. Albert. We could tie this into something he's an expert in, which is they talk to actors about, learn the skill, they learn the skill of acting and all that. But then there comes a point they'll talk about go with your gut. Just go with your gut. The brilliant moments happen on stage and screen when you just go with your gut.
yeah.
Right? I'll tell my story and then we'll have Albert tell his. One is they were talking about how in Silence of the Lambs, right? In the opening scene where we meet Hannibal Lecter for the first time, and if you read the book, he's pacing in his cage like a caged tiger, right? When you see the movie, he's standing still. He doesn't move. He doesn't blink, And they said right before they hit action, and I think it was Demi was the director, he just, Anthony Hopkins goes, I just had this idea, rather than be like a caged tiger, I'll be like a snake. So he didn't move. Right? And that's scary as shit.
Yeah.
Plus he's a little guy, which, and actually in the book, he's a big guy. So it made it much more. And he goes, I just decided to go with it because, they didn't like it. We'll just redo it. But it was that intuition. So Mr. Albert, share with us your ideas and thoughts about intuition and psychic stuff.
It's interesting because I come from, the academic world. Well, I'm recovering. I call myself a recovering academic because a lot of that would have been dismissed really, really fast. Anything of psychic or intuition would be would kind of be thrown away right away. I mean, the only thing coming close to it in my studies was like studying Carl Rogers and humanistic thought, which went big on trusting your inner guide in a sense, which is the same as intuition in my opinion. Just another word of that. But I've always, and I've had this conflict growing up because I've always felt that myself was very intuitive. Like I knew stuff, not necessarily, I wouldn't say I was psychic, but I knew I would have feelings that things would go wrong and they would, or something would go right and they would go right. So I always believed I had an inner sense, an intuition. And I still to this day, I mean, one quick thing about psychics, about 20 years ago, I was dating someone at the time who she said, let's go to a psychic. Let's go get a psychic reading. And I was like, okay, as you know, the guy, we'll go along. I went in and this time I was in grad school for marriage and family therapy. I had no background in anything. And I asked her, in anything in this business I'm in now in the entertainment. So I asked her, where do you see myself working in like 10, 20 years? She goes, you're going to work in show business. And I literally almost wanted to ask for my money back right then. Cause I'm like, this is, I have no interest in show business at the time. I was, expecting her to say I was going to be a psychologist or I was going to be this, therapist for my own practice. And, and she was like, hell bent. I said, are you sure? She goes, yeah, you're going to be working with celebrities and actors in your career. And I dismissed that she was like a fraud and I walked out. So it really made it interesting, that after I started my business, I was just that memory just popped back and the hair on my neck stood up.
Well, Albert,
yes.
Forgive the interruption, but this is too fascinating not to ask the question. But if you were that sure that you were not going to go that direction, how in the heck did you end up there?
Well, that's a whole nother talk in itself. Because it so happened that one summer I was watching, when I was in school, And at the time, I had no life really during the summer, so I became addicted to talk shows, and I was watching daytime talk shows. And one of the shows that I used to watch was Sally Jesse Raphael. I don't know if anybody remembers her.
Oh, I loved that show. Yes.
So there was one therapist who was always on, and she really fascinated me. And I went to her website, the therapist's website at the time, and I emailed her. I said, really fascinated by your work, and and I'd really love to come in and I'd work with you at some point. And I told her I was in grad school. But a month later, she emails me back, which blew me away because she was like a celebrity therapist on a show. She said, "I'm looking for an internship." Intern.
Wow.
Okay. And then I did the internship with her, and then this is right around the time of 9/11. When 9/11 happened, she's like, I need your help in doing a project. We're setting a nonprofit. I need your help. By the way, we're going to be stationed with a lot of actors, at the time. So I started working with actors, doing a little bit of counseling, a little bit of therapy. And then a lot of people said, the actors, like, you really belong with us in the business. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So
fascinating.
So I'm a very big, now kind of a believer in psychic, a little bit because I've had proof. But it is kind of balanced because there's still part of me that's always going to be that scientist where it's like, okay, let me see empirical evidence. I'm not going to go, I don't know if I believe every claim, but that I hear, but I'm definitely, it'd be interesting to kind of like do empirical studies on this stuff like hypnosis and NLP for psychic development. So I've always been interested in kind of like bridging the two together. Including like doing like with past life work and all that stuff, but try to put some empirical evidence behind it. Not necessarily that do we have past lives, but does this stuff really improve people's lives, the processes at least. So
Yeah, sure.
So that's that's pretty much where I'm coming from on this issue.
Cool. But what do you think about though, like how you have to help retrain actors to get in touch with their gut?
Yeah, that's a challenge because like especially in like working at your studio, that's a lot of times that's really is just one of the fundamental principles is really get into your gut and be your own self in this role. Because a lot of times actors put on layers and think that, okay, I really have to pretend to be somebody else. And, playing a character is, definitely you are stepping into somebody else's world, but you're still bringing in your own world. And, same thing with, you just talked about Anthony Hopkins, really, Hannibal Lecter was really just Anthony Hopkins playing Hannibal Lecter. That's why it worked so well for him, because he really was kind of like himself to an element playing that role. He brought his own, went into his own gut and really just, really internalized the character. And that's why, people who really watched this movie, really found Anthony Hopkins to be creepy.
Yeah.
Because really, technically, the mannerisms, like Anthony, a lot of these really well-known actors, they're playing, they're reading a different script or different dialogue, but their mannerisms are pretty much themselves, really being themselves. And that's why they make it look so easy. Because that's why acting, in a sense, on one hand is easy, but it's hard at the same time. So
preach, brother, preach.
Yeah. No, you have to kind of like on one hand to go into your inner world, really add layers to the character, but at the same time, don't forget who you are. And that's why, like, part of method acting training is like, let's say you're going into you have to play a Southern accent. So one of the ways to train yourself to do that is the entire day before the audition, speak to everybody in the Southern accent. In a sense, when you go get coffee, for example, talk to, when you're ordering coffee, use that accent that you have to do for that role. Right. So that it just becomes natural now to you.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool.
You know, it's kind of fun too. You almost get to explore, like in a parallel universe, who would I be if, you know, I came from this region, or if I had this accent, how would my life change?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
great exercise in creativity.
Yeah. What about you, Miss Pam?
I am a big believer in following your gut instinct, you know, and your intuition. I've had just so many instances where it's kind of panned out. For instance, during my Reiki 2 training, we were doing having one of the other classmates in another room, and we were supposed to see what we picked up on with them. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, 2 feet in front of my face, I see a picture. The picture comes closer and closer to me, and I see this woman's chest, and I see a picture of her left breast, and I see big black stitches across the bottom of her left breast. And it kind of unnerved me, but I knew in every ounce of my being that this woman had breast cancer, and I did not want it. We would go back into the room, you know, one by one, and you know, share what we saw. And I did not want to share, you know, that I saw that she had breast cancer. But anyway, when I shared that with the instructor, she said, "Well, just say to her, you know, I see something with your left breast. Does that mean anything to you?" And sure enough, that's what I did. And the woman turned white and she said, "Yes, I had breast cancer in my left breast. They removed the, you know, part of the lower part of my left breast." And she said at the 6 o'clock position, which is exactly where I saw it. I've had like many instances like that. My cat was at the time was very ill, and I took it to the vet. And a number, you know, he did all these tests, cost me hundreds of dollars, and they couldn't find. They wanted to finally. They told me he had feline AIDS, and they didn't know what to do. Finally, they said we're going to have to do exploratory surgery. Well, you were talking about remote viewing, and you were talking about taking your consciousness in. Well, I did a body scan of the cat, and what I saw was his 2 kidneys were lighting up like red neon lights, you know, like the old signs in the stores where they had the flashing red neon lights. So I saw the 2 kidneys, and they were red flashing lights. And I went back to the vet and I said, you know, could you please check out the kidneys? And sure enough, it was his kidneys. Another time on the surface, I was in a relationship, and the person was telling me one thing, and I knew in my gut. You were talking on Saturday's call, Will, about the 3 brains, and you were so right. You know, we have the brain in the skull, the brain in the heart, and the brain in the stomach, which is loaded with neurons. And we actually produce almost as much serotonin in the gut as we do in the brain. But anyway, I do believe that we do get a lot of information in the gut. Well, with that relationship, on the surface, everything was great. He's telling me everything was great and wonderful. But later on that night, I was supposed to be seeing him, and I got right after I saw him, I got this feeling almost in my gut like I was being punched in the stomach. And I do get a lot of the intuitions in my stomach, physically in the stomach. So, and I didn't know why. I got the punch in the stomach feeling, and then I felt this feeling of gloom and doom. And I did again on a conscious level. There was no reason for it. Everything was great, but it so happened that was the last time that I saw him. He never showed up that night, and it was the last time I saw him. But I felt the punch in the gut, and I felt this feeling of gloom and doom, and I was picking up that this is what was about to happen. And one other time, to share another experience, because you were talking about downloading. There's times when I've projected my consciousness in, such as with the cat, when I did a body scan and picked up that information by going inward, scanning the body. There's other times where it was like the download, what you were saying about the download. There was another time, again, on the surface, on a conscious level, things were really good. but I was feeling a lot of pain in this particular situation. And I didn't understand why, because there was that incongruity that everything was fine, but at the same time, I just felt pain and I felt like it was not right. And I put it out to the universe. I said, please show me with my own two eyes. I have to see what's going on and why this situation is not right. And little did I know, later that night, I was being guided, and this was really kind of spooky, because a voice told me, you need to go here and you need to do this. And I've since learned that I don't ignore the voices, I don't ignore the intuitions. I learned to act on them. So in this particular situation, it was an audible, it was a voice that guided me, go here, do this. And of course, that was the answer I needed to see to extricate myself from a situation that was not good for me. I literally did follow the voice, and it guided me about 45-minute drive away from where I was. And literally, I did not want to go. It was late at night, and it was a thunderstorm, pouring rain outside. I really didn't want to do that, and I was really saying to the voice, "No, I'll do this tomorrow." And actually, when I refused to do it, the voice got louder and louder, demanded me, no, do this now. And when I did, that was the answer to my question. And I was able to extricate myself from a situation that was not going to be good for me. Had I not listened to the voice and done that, I would have never have gotten my answer, because it was something I had to see in that moment. And when I look back, it was the same day that I put it out to the universe in the morning. Please show me with my own two eyes. Let me see what's going on. So I've had the guidance that was an audible. We talk about visual, kinesthetic, auditory. For me, I've gotten them with the situation with the woman and with my cat. That was visual. I could literally see it. With this other situation, it was auditory. I was actually being guided by a voice. I don't know if it was a guide. I don't know if it's an angel. I don't know what, but it was an answer to my question that I put out there, and that was an auditory guidance. And in the other situation, it was kinesthetic, the feeling of being punched in the gut, and knowing that this was not right. And so I really have had a number of situations where where I've experienced getting answers and seeing things by listening to that internal cues.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Well, the other thing I was told by, I forget who, I think it was a lady, she's since passed away. She's big at the Guild. And I met her in 90. And I don't know, somehow we were talking about something. And long story short, somebody asked her about, because about the presidential election that was going to start soon. I think maybe it was 91. And she goes, I don't know, it's going to be, somebody asked about the president, and this was when Bush was running, right? But the first Bush. Anyway, she goes, nope, it's going to be some Southern guy with a hick name. And everybody made fun of it, right? And she was not political, so it was, that one kind of impressed me. But she used to tell people, because I was at one of her trainings and at the Guild, where she's talking about, she goes, well, when you go against your intuition, because a lot of us will, then the first thing you have to do is don't beat yourself up, but apologize to your intuition for not following through.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And wasn't too long after that, I was driving, supposed to get on the highway, and there's two ways I could go. The toll road, which cost a few bucks, or the free one. I thought, it's 1 PM. Nobody's going to be on the highway. Yada, yada, yada. I get stuck in the middle of a gas tanker wrecked. So the whole highway shut down for 6 hours.
Oh.
And you couldn't get off, you couldn't get on. You were just screwed, right? People were pissing on the side of the road. It was like horrible, right? And so that was the first time I had to remember to thank that intuition. I kept saying, no, you want to take the, don't be a cheap son of a bitch. Take the toll road. It's only $3. And rather than get stuck 6 hours on the on I-94. So anyway, cool. I thought that was good. I thought we had fun.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
many good stories.
Yeah, and
I'd like to learn more about it because I really, since the abusive marriage, it's a lot. It's very new to me. I mean, I have told this story many times that when I went to my excellent, very good abuse recovery specialist and therapist, I was sobbing, crying. I was, sort of hysterical. And she's like, okay, we're gonna do something tapping. Have you heard of tapping? I'm like, no. And she's like, okay, just do what I do. And so I was doing what she did, and she was saying stuff, and she told me to say stuff, and I could keep my eyes open or closed. Her eyes were closed, so I closed my eyes. And so I was doing everything that she said to do. And I stopped crying, and I was like, what in the world is she doing? What is she doing? And then we ended, and I was like peeking, and she kept doing this, and I opened my eyes when she said, okay, and open your eyes. And she goes, and how are you feeling? I'm like, well, fine. She goes, do you have questions? I'm like, yes. Yes. What just happened? Are you a witch? Is this a witchcraft thing? What just happened? I mean, I was so scared because I had never, I didn't know what tapping was. And she laughed and she went, no, but, because she was a very open-minded therapist, a very open in a psychological facility. But I thought, oh my God, she's making witchcraft on me. And I didn't know. It's like one of those, like Dr. Will says, you don't know what you don't know. And so I learned, going on from there, I learned about EFT and how it helps break your state and put you in a better place. But I would really appreciate learning so much more about this because while I always thought I was intuitive, I realized I wasn't. I'm Italian, so I must be intuitive. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, and like, yeah, and I think most of us are trained not to listen to it,
Mm-hmm. It's there.
and then and then when we do listen to it, we justify it. We'll go back and
That's
find the
it.
evidence, right? Rather than just,
Mm-hmm.
just do whatever it is. All right, everyone, cool.
Thank you.
All right.
Great.
Yeah, maybe we'll do more on this.
And then I
Yeah,
put a thing
please.
in the chat.
Yeah, this is something from the CIA.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Oh,
just so
cool.
copy that. There's a bunch of stuff that they've declassified that what they did,
Okay.
especially in the height of the Cold War. They were studying everything, man. They were studying everything,
Oh,
They say they've stopped. I don't know if they have, I don't know if they have. But they've learned a lot learning this. I mean, I still think we're in the midst of the biggest psychological misinformation campaign in the history of the world. And it's working.
God is.
Absolutely.
Please give us a class. Yes.
It's like, I always default to, so this virus is so smart, the players on the field don't have to wear a mask, but the coaches do. So it knows the difference between a player and a coach.
That's a smart virus.
Yeah. No,
And then
really,
if nothing, and they pointed out, like, from the NFL, not the NBA, because they were in a bubble. The NFL, these guys aren't in a bubble, and actually it's turning out quite well. They're getting a few, and it's also, and that's where I think it's waking people up, because it's going like, so you hear, oh, this guy got put on the COVID-19 protocol, but he never gets sick, and then he's back playing 5 days later. You're like, so what's good? People, it's kind of interesting. It will be interesting, Yeah. And then, not to sound conspiracy theory, but kind of like the one time I would say, like, Trump got something right. He's like, well, they're going to have this vaccine by the end of the year, and it's like, interesting, good luck with that. I ain't taking that damn thing. But
Yeah, I'm with you there, Will.
I'm not either.
No
Too
way in hell.
quick.
But
So my-
unfortunately, they want to make it mandatory. A lot of places want to make it mandatory.
well, we'll see. We'll see.
It's my body.
Well,
That's
yeah,
right.
you know, and all this, it'll be interesting to see. Because then if you say you don't want to take it, then they yell at you and you know, and then say, well, they could just make it like if you want to get on an airplane, you got to show your vaccine card. Well, then for that to work, every airline would have to agree.
Yeah.
And the airline doesn't want to turn people away, especially
And
right
then there's
now.
HIPAA and OSHA.
Yeah. And then, you know, so it'll be, and, you know, those of us that studied statistics, I'm not saying I wouldn't take it after a 10-year longitudinal study,
Right.
you know,
Right. Right.
but yeah, I still think, let me turn off the recording or hit pause.